All right, thank you very much, Allison and Delia, for inviting me to be here today. I'm more of the practical application part of the program. I'm a nutritionist by training, and I support our America's business at the Campbell Soup Company, which is largely our soup business. So first I want to talk a little bit about I'm going to go through a few things. I'm going to talk specifically about the challenges in sodium reduction in the soup category. Both Mike and Kathy mentioned the differences between food categories. I'm also going to talk about the challenges and differences within a food category. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the consumer research that we have done, showing you the results of some consumer studies on two very different kinds of soups that were tested at different sodium levels with consumers and their acceptability. And I'll end with what we're doing today to offer consumers some choice. So sodium reduction has been a journey for the Campbell Soup Company. The company really began in earnest to reduce sodium in products in the 1980s when there was some significant consumer interest in that. But many challenges remain, and I'd like to share some of the knowledge that the company has amassed over the years. But the key takeaway is going to be that there really is no one-size-fits-all endeavor, that the actual food and its format determine the opportunity, and that we've heard sodium chloride plays a number of roles in foods, and at this time there is no commercially viable one-to-one alternative for salt that works in all food formats. So we've talked about the fact that salt brings out the flavor in food, and there's a significant difference between using salt or sodium within a food than on the surface of a food. And for example, in soup, salt brings out the savory notes in chicken broth. It brings out the brightness of carrots. It improves the taste of vegetables. And we all need to eat more vegetables, so that's a good thing. So this is where I'll start. Taste is the number one driver of purchase intent, and that is over cost, convenience, and health. In almost all situations, taste is the number one driver. And so our goal for sodium reduction is to maintain that acceptability and that taste for consumers. In Soup and Simple Meals, we can approach this in two different ways. We can reduce the sodium, and the resulting product will have a different taste profile, and then hope the consumer accepts that different experience. Or we can reduce the sodium while working to maintain the savory flavor so that there's equal consumer acceptability and we're giving consumers that same taste profile. The composition of the food impacts the approach and feasibility of success. I know there'll be other presenters that will go more into depth on this, but it's generally easier to reduce sodium in soups with high inherent levels of glutamic acid and nucleotides, as these will hit our umami receptors and work together to bring out the savory notes in foods. There's also an increased saltiness perception in high acid products like tomato soup, which can provide opportunities for sodium reduction. And then also, as Paul mentioned, there's a higher saltiness perception in sweet foods, and we can also use sweetness to modulate the effects of off notes like potassium chloride will bring to foods. So we've been working on sodium reduction for a long time, and even as far back as the 80s and 90s, Campbell's was conducting a significant amount of research with consumers and tested a number of different soups at different sodium levels for consumer liking and acceptability. So I'm going to take you through some of the results of this work for two very different types of soup. I chose these soups, chicken noodle and tomato, because of their importance to our portfolio, as well as the fact that they have two very different flavor profiles. And also because consumers have very defined and very specific taste expectations for these products. And you may hear this later, but it's actually easier to bring to market a brand new product at lower sodium levels than to reformulate an existing product that consumers already have expectations for. So just to go over and tie this back to my previous slide, chicken noodle has a very basic broth-based flavor profile. It's a low viscosity soup. It has few ingredients, and the flavor, the savory flavors are enhanced through the use of salt and MSG. Tomato soup, on the other hand, is a high acid product. It has a higher viscosity. It has higher inherent glutamic acid, bringing an umami flavor, and it also has inherent and added sugars that help balance the acidity of the soup. So two very different formats. So the research objective for this, some of this consumer learning, was to assess whether there was equal acceptability of lower sodium formulas achieved compared to full sodium versions with multiple uses over time. So the research design was a home use test with 5 weekly eating occasions over a 6-week period. And we test overall liking, and I'm showing right here overall liking for the soup. We also did extensive savory testing prior to this external consumer test. Now in this test, you'll notice that the liking scores, while they did decrease, and we did get feedback that the overall flavor, tartness, richness, tomato flavor, and seasoning went down, it was still within acceptable levels. And the range of sodium reduction for tomato soup compared to what I'll show you later for chicken noodle soup was actually a tighter range, that the starting point for tomato soup was around 700, 800 milligrams, and the end point in the study was about 520. But we were still able to maintain an acceptable level of liking with consumers. And this was the foundational research that ultimately led to the commercial product that we reformulated and put into the marketplace in 2009. Now, to tie this back to some of the earlier presentations, we talked about the role of salt and flavor, and just the saltiness flavor in general. But consumers, just by taking out the salt in some of these formulations, also perceived changes in other flavor components of the soup. Like I said, tartness, richness, and tomato flavor, when those things hadn't changed. So this ultimately led to the commercially viable product that we launched in 2009. And there was a period of time in between as we continued to work on this, because our action standard for tomato soup was equal or better liking than the original product. We weren't willing to change the flavor profile of our iconic tomato soup. And we did achieve that. We launched the product in 2009, and then we tested the product again with consumers in all 50 states. And we found that virtually all consumers said that they liked our reformulated tomato soup as well as the original tomato soup. Some of the product developers at Campbell's will disagree with that, as they can taste potassium chloride, and they bought up a lot of the old tomato soup before we launched it. I will tell you though, in the consumer testing where we actually tested the product with consumers, the consumers did tell us that 70 to 75% of them were more likely to purchase tomato soup with lower sodium levels, and that 80% said that the benefits of sodium reduction would be one of the reasons why they would do that. However, later tests where we tested actual labels with consumers without them tasting the product, and the labels had claims or information about the sodium reduction, we found out that this significantly decreased purchase intent. So when we went out with a reformulated version of tomato soup, we did not call out that reformulation on label. Now for chicken noodle soup, same test, home use test, over 6 weeks. We tested the product, and you'll see that we did not meet our action standard for this reformulation, that we were only able to achieve acceptable liking within about 100 milligram difference in sodium, and that at lower than 880 milligrams of sodium, there's a significant decrease in consumer liking. And it wasn't only the saltiness perception, but also overall flavor, chicken flavor, broth flavor, and the amount of seasoning. The key insight for us with this test was that even with extensive use and over a long period of time, not every variety is able to achieve equal acceptability with sodium reduction. due to the degree of sodium reduction, its use as soup or soup as an ingredient, and the type and amount of other flavor delivering ingredients. And the ability to replicate full flavor provided by salt in lower sodium soups appears variety dependent. So we're not really talking about the ability to create a category limit, but we're also talking about variability within the category and within the food format. We were able to optimize the recipe and only reduce sodium about 100 milligrams with equal consumer acceptance. And this is where we really look at a choice model. So this is that second type of reformulation where we offer our consumers the same product they had in the marketplace, and we also offer them a lower sodium choice. So those interested in lower sodium choices can choose our healthy request, chicken noodle soup, which is at 410 milligrams of sodium, but it has a completely different taste profile. And just to put it into perspective for you, the relative size of that healthy request chicken noodle stew is about 1/5 the size as our icon chicken noodles. So not all consumers are willing to accept a different flavor profile or a lower sodium soup. And then just really quickly, I just wanted to bring this up because we've talked about the potential salt replacers or the ways that we can help enhance saltiness flavor, but we haven't talked about what consumers think about those ingredients. And so we also did some consumer research on the consumer acceptability of salt replacers. And you'll see that when compared to natural flavoring, all of these choices are less acceptable to consumers than salt. So it really is something that we have to consider as we reformulate products. At the end of the day, our goal is to create delicious, affordable, nutritious foods that our consumers like.
Thank you very much. I think we have, if there's no questions, I kind of have a question, and that is, is it your perception that soup is more or less at an extreme end of the difference between, say, the noodle soup and the tomato soup? Would we find that in other categories too? Or do you think there's something about soup and salt and sodium that's particularly special, either technologically or consumer response?
So I can't speak to the degree of variability amongst other food categories because I know a little bit more about this one, but absolutely within the soup and simple meals category, there's not a standard. It's not like milk that has a standard and milks will all be very similar. Each recipe is very different, so it really is a recipe approach to what is possible. I also think that soup has been around for a long time, and some of these products have been around for a long time, and consumers have distinct expectations for what these products should taste like. So I think that plays a significant role in how much we can change a product. Now, as we bring new products to the marketplace, so Campbell's has been able to we have over 60 soups that are at 480 milligrams of sodium. So we've been able to bring new soups to the marketplace at lower levels of sodium with some degree of success. And we've been able to either bring to market or reduce some varieties of soups to about 650 milligrams. But we're not going to be able to achieve that type of reduction across all recipes and across the entire portfolio.
And I guess it is probably proprietary information, but I'm wondering how much has the American preference been homogenous? In other words, you said you did it in all 50 states. I personally would be curious to know if in certain areas of the country there was a different response to this, and I don't even know if we have the data, but I think it's an interesting question.